Adolf Hitler versus Joseph Stalin. Two names that send shivers down the spine. But when it comes to sheer brutality, who stands as history's darkest villain? Today we pit these two infamous dictators head-to-head to see who was truly worse. Let's start with the numbers. Hitler's reign resulted in approximately 17 million deaths. 6 million Jews were murdered in the Holocaust, alongside countless others targeted for their ethnicity, disabilities, or political beliefs. Systematic, calculated, and horrifying. Hitler's genocide wasn't a side effect. It was the main objective. Take Auschwitz-Birkenau as an example. Over 1 million souls were exterminated in this death camp alone. Men, women, and children were sorted like cattle. Those deemed fit were forced into labor under inhuman conditions, while the rest were led straight to the gas chambers. They were told they were going for a shower, only to be sealed inside and suffocated with Zyklon B gas. The screams of the victims, clawing at the walls, lingered long after they had fallen silent. This was not war. It was a factory of death, designed for efficiency and horror. Now Stalin. His death toll? Roughly 20 million if you include the Great Purge, Gulag labor camps, and the man-made famine in Ukraine. Stalin's victims were often his own people, starved, imprisoned, or executed in the name of power and industrial progress. For Stalin, human lives were just pieces on a political chessboard. The Holodomor, or the Ukrainian famine of 1932-33, stands as one of his most chilling acts. Imagine entire villages reduced to silence. Stalin's policies of forced grain requisition left millions of Ukrainians without food, their pantries emptied by soldiers who cared nothing for their survival. Starving families resorted to eating grass, tree bark, and eventually each other. Yes, cannibalism became a desperate reality in the face of famine. Parents watched their children waste away, powerless as their bodies withered from hunger. Stalin's response? He sealed off the region to ensure no aid could enter, condemning millions to a slow, agonizing death. Motivation is where their evil takes different shapes. Hitler was driven by a twisted ideology, a vision of a master race that justified the extermination of millions. His hatred was focused, relentless, and all-consuming. Kristallnacht, the Night of Broken Glass in 1938, showed just how deep his hatred ran. Across Germany, Jewish homes, businesses, and synagogues were smashed and burned to the ground. Over 30,000 Jews were rounded up and sent to concentration camps. It was the beginning of the end for European Jewry, a night when hatred was unleashed with a vengeance. Stalin, on the other hand, was obsessed with paranoia and control. His purges weren't about race, but about crushing any threat to his rule. To him, anyone could be the enemy, even yesterday's allies. The Great Purge of the late 1930s was a bloodbath that turned the Soviet Union into a land of fear. Military leaders, intellectuals, and even loyal Communist Party members were dragged from their homes, tortured, and forced into confessions of treason. Most were executed or sent to the Gulag camps in Siberia, where they were worked to death in sub-zero temperatures, starving and broken. Stalin's iron grip didn't just choke dissent, it strangled the soul of a nation. In terms of method, Hitler's atrocities were surgical, planned with chilling precision. Concentration camps, gas chambers, the final solution. Every detail designed to maximize suffering and death. One of the most horrific moments was the Einsatzgruppen death squads, which followed the German army's advance into the Soviet Union. These mobile killing units didn't wait for camps. They massacred entire villages on the spot, shooting men, women, and children into mass graves they had dug themselves. Victims were lined up at the edge, shot, and fell into the pit, layer upon layer of the dead and dying. Stalin's brutality was more chaotic but just as deadly. Mass executions, forced labor, and starvation as tools to break the spirit of a nation. The Katyn Massacre in 1940 is a stark example. Over 22,000 Polish officers, intellectuals, and prisoners of war were systematically shot in the back of the head, their bodies buried in mass graves. Stalin intended to wipe out Poland's elite, ensuring there would be no leaders left to resist Soviet domination. It was genocide with a strategic purpose, to erase an entire generation of potential leaders. Legacy time. Hitler's name is now synonymous with pure evil, and Nazism remains universally condemned. Statues of him? Never. But Stalin? His legacy is tangled. Some still see him as a hero in Russia, a symbol of Soviet strength, while others remember him as a tyrant. There are statues, debates, even nostalgia in some circles. Why? Because he wasn't just feared, he was also mythologized. So who's worse?